Mumbai, I mean,
Mhm.
Mumbai, you kind of make things happen, right? You just go with the
Right.
flow, and it's like New York City in some ways. The exposure you have to people and lifestyles and things like that in the United States, I think, is unparalleled. Nothing has to happen by year 17 or by year 21 or by year 25, right? Some people just take
Mhm.
longer. First conversations I had with my roommates back in when I come to Penn State was, when do you have any plans of going back? What are your ambitions around, when will you go back if you go back, right?
Welcome to Story2here, where we share unique stories of Indian immigrants who have made it to the US. I'm Abhishek, your host, where we share their experiences, struggles, and triumphs with you. If you're looking for guidance and want to get inspired by fellow Indians who had similar background and struggles growing up, this is the place for you.
Yep. Yeah. So, Kaushik, you are in Florida. How's the weather?
It's a little too hot for my liking, but it's not bad. I mean, it's in the mid 80s. It's comfortable. It's Jacksonville, so it's not as hot as South Florida, but
Uh-huh.
it's okay. And Atlanta was really fluctuating between a lot of rain and some cold weather and all of that. But it's nice. More importantly, it's nice to kind of come out here and spend time with the family. We haven't done that in a while. It turns out, in more than 6 to 8 months, even though my brother lives so close by. So I'm glad I could finally make it out, and it's good. It's good.
So you are at your brother's place in
Yes.
Florida, and you guys are you two brothers, or do you have more siblings?
No, just the two of us. Just the two of us. And my brother is he's 2.5 years older than I am, and
Uh-huh.
he, for the longest time, till about 7 years ago, he lived in Australia. So he was in Australia
Oh,
for about almost 15 years, and I've been here now 22 years. So for about 15 years, my brother was in a different continent. I was in a different continent. My parents
uh-huh.
lived in India,
Oh, wow.
and it was really hard for everybody to kind of move around and things like that. But thankfully, he found his way back in from Australia to the US, to Phoenix, and then to
Mm-hmm.
Jacksonville. And Jacksonville is close enough to where stuff actually works out, and we
For
can see
you.
each other and do stuff. So yeah.
Wow, wow. So it's like a reunion. You said after like 15 years. So how long has he been here?
He's been here now about 7 years. So in the
Ah,
US, and in Jacksonville, about six of that. He moved
okay,
to
okay.
Phoenix first, and then he
Mm-hmm.
hated Phoenix. He just couldn't be there. And then
Mm-hmm.
he said, and this is much closer to everybody. So
To every, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And of
Okay.
course, the icing on the cake is during COVID, my parents actually emigrated to the US as well.
Oh,
So they live in Atlanta now, about
with
15
with
minutes from
you.
where we live, and that worked out quite well because they're getting older in age, and
Mm.
we're there to support them, and we've got some family and friends in the area, so it helps for them as well. So yeah.
Oh, so that I think that's an interesting like life in event, right? So me as well, like I got my citizenship last year,
Hmm.
and then I think there has been a question, and I sort of put out a video a couple of weeks back. So I was in India last month, and I was just doing some math, saying that if I were to be like every 2 years being in India for a month or so, like a 4 weeks. And my parents are almost 70 years old, and
Yeah.
if they live up to 80, essentially, if I multiply the weeks that I'll be with them till the time they die, would be like 4 months in total. Like if I
Wow.
were to
Wow.
if you were to take it, if you
Sure.
just visit every 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And the question always comes back saying, and if you guys are staying outside, why don't you take your parents along and why don't they
Right.
come and stay? So, what's been your experience? Your parents were in India, and then now your brother and yourself are in the US. How has been this move, and how have they taken it? Like moving
Yeah.
to the US at the very end of their life.
Yeah, no, it's a huge change, right? It's nowhere near the same kind of transitions
Hmm.
that we had coming out of college and 21 to 22 to 23-year-olds hopping on a plane and coming here is a very different experience than uprooting your entire network and support system and everything that you would do, your social kind of environment, everything's kind of gone haywire, right? So it's a huge transition for them. But I think being close. So more context. So my wife, essentially, she moved here in the early 90s. So she's pretty much grown up here. She went to middle school, like late elementary school, middle school onwards. So her parents did almost the same thing, but they did it in their 40s. So when they were 40, they basically sold everything they had in India and they moved to the US and they set up their family here. So we have that kind of extended support network in addition to here as well. But again, doing it when we were in the 20s, my in-laws doing it when they're 40s, and my parents doing it when my dad's 73, my mom's 67. So they're coming up to that same age bracket. It's a huge change for them. The advantage, of course, is that my dad's able to drive. So he drives in the United States, and that's a big positive. They've always liked to travel. So they've been fortunate enough to where they've traveled around and experienced the US and all of that. So they knew what they were getting into. But I think more importantly, what they felt was, to your point, as they get older in age, my parents had two priorities. One, they did not want to be a burden on us, in the sense of, being in India and us having to, my brother and I having to kind of come back and forth and do all of those things. They did not want that. And they wanted to certainly, and when I say a burden, it's not just emotional, physical, but also financial, right? So they wanted to kind of do the whole thing and set it up in a way that they can wind everything up so that, if something were to happen, then we don't have to deal with, the challenges of transacting in India, right? So they wanted to do that. And then the priority number two was obviously to be next to the family. And so being in Atlanta, they could be next to, the grandkids, my in-laws, whom they're actually very good friends with, and they kind of hang out, they do trips and all of that. So, I think the pros and cons are still something they're weighing through, but, it's been a blessing in some ways, because, dad had a stroke late last year, and he had to go through like a open heart surgery, and it was we were very fortunate that we live 10 minutes away, and then they just had to pick up the phone and tell me, and we just rushed over, and then it went from nothing to like full-blown surgery and rehab and everything over a 3-month period, and we were all there around him to help. So so it's when you look back, I think it's a very risky decision. It's a bold decision, but when you think about all of that, I think they're in a good place. We certainly like having them around. Obviously, it comes with its challenges, right? Now you're you're a phone call away, which means you're literally a phone call away for everything. So
right. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the US, even people who are born and raised here, I think the challenge sometimes are as the family grows, like parents grow old, you also have your kids. So you are essentially now juggling between raising another generation and taking care of another generation. And you are sort of in the middle of your career as well, where you are figuring things out, or the mid-career is also there. I mean, these are challenging times for like various regions, and it's a bold thing that you just mentioned, right? Like having parents close by also has its advantages, but also it means you at this age has to take up more responsibility beyond yourself.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think there's a lot of advantages, right? I mean, my wife works, we all work, we're all kind of doing, like you said, 50 things at the same time. Our days get pretty packed, but having both sets of parents within like 15 minutes of each other is amazing, right? For a variety of reasons. Sometimes if it is pickups and drop-offs, or it is, even meals, right? So stuff just gets made and delivered to your house even when you don't know it, right? So you get pampered a little bit. So there's a lot of positives to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, Kaushik, we'll start as we are talking about your parents. So, where were you raised in India, and how did the journey begin?
Yeah, so I'm I guess what you'd call as a third generation Mumbaikar. So I grew
Ah,
up in Bombay. My parents also, my grandfathers both moved from South India, from
mm-hmm,
in and around Chennai. They moved from there to Mumbai many years ago, about 75 years ago. And
mm-hmm,
then my parents were both were born and brought up in Mumbai, and I was born and brought up in Mumbai. Grew up in a very I think it's fair to say that we were kind of progressive Tambrams, Tamil Brahmins,
mm-hmm,
if you know.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So my parents are still very religious. They
mm-hmm,
practice. They're very conservative in that sense. But they
mm-hmm,
were also very open to exploring and living in a cosmopolitan city like Mumbai.
right,
You're exposed to
mm-hmm,
everything, the languages, the culture, the food, and everything else, right?
yeah,
So they've been very outgoing in that sense, and so we always enjoyed. I remember going even as a kid. We would go out and eat in a restaurant, even if it was
mm-hmm,
once in like 2 weeks or a month or something like that, and that was awesome. Yeah, so grew up in a somewhat of a mixed kind of culture,
mm-hmm,
if you will, right?
mm-hmm,
So we still had a lot of those religious components to it,
mm-hmm.
and we also enjoyed our get-togethers and celebrations and food and
Mm-hmm.
drinks and this and that, right? So we try to balance both.
So you essentially, so when I think about Mumbaikar, right? So Mumbaikar, I was telling my wife like Mumbai is US, sort of a US in India. I mean, where immigrants from different places come in and they've stayed. And I think other than Mumbai, I don't think any other city has that kind of a scale where immigrants are coming in. I know Maharashtrians are big in Maharashtra, but Bombay, I don't think it's. I could be wrong, but there are like more immigrants within India who have moved to Mumbai. So for you to move, like as I would say, right? So as you were growing up, did you ever feel in Bombay that you were an outsider? As you just said, like though you had to
Um,
qualify that you're a third generation
I had
Mumbaiker.
Yeah, yeah. I had my moments, I would say. I mean, I do think there are instances when if I spoke Marathi or I spoke Hindi, sometimes there would be, words that I would bring in that were, I mean, we weren't, we didn't speak extensively in my native tongue in Tamil at home as
Mhm,
much. We actually spoke a lot more English and we'd speak Hindi and all of that stuff too. But every once in a while, I would use a word that my friends would like
mhm,
laugh about and
mhm,
and joke about. So I don't think I ever felt that. I don't think there was a discrimination experience per se. You
mhm,
grow up some of my best friends were Sindhis and Marathi
mhm,
or Tamil or whoever, right? So it was pretty
mhm,
diverse, Gujaratis all over. I
mhm,
do think, of course, that back in the 80s, that environment is very different than what it is now, right? I was in South India in Chennai this December, and it was my
mhm,
first time actually going back and spending meaningful time there. Otherwise, you're just when you go back
mhm.
to India, as you may know, you're just going in, you're visiting relatives, and then you're coming
Right,
back.
right. Yep.
But for the first time, we actually spent like a week outside of that. We spent time with relatives, then we spent a week. We had like
Mhm,
a little apartment and we were roaming and exploring the
mhm,
town, the city
mhm.
ourselves. And I got to see that even in places like Chennai, everything's a melting pot now. I mean, pretty much
Yeah, yeah.
every town,
Mhm,
every city has got, the diversity in cuisine, the diversity in people all over, all over.
mhm,
But no, I don't think I had a necessarily a negative experience in Mumbai. I
mhm,
mean, Mumbai,
mhm.
you kind of make things happen, right? You just go with the
Right.
flow, and it's like New York City in some ways. So
Yeah, yeah. Mhm,
you're just like running at 100 miles an hour, and you're just getting things
mhm,
done wherever you go. So,
mhm.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's yeah, that's so I think yeah, that's interesting. So like I mean, as people, as I have moved here, this has been like I've stayed in Hyderabad, even Kolkata, where outside my hometown. But I mean, coming to the US, you can see the diversity at scale. I mean, that's the way this country is built. Until unless you're here, you don't understand the scale of diversity. staying in any other country. Even any European countries where you were to go, you won't see this kind of diversity. But as you just said, it brings in a different kind of attitude, which I think, as you said, you took it with you never felt out of place in Bombay. That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
And
no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I 100% agree with what you're saying. I mean, having seen my brother's experience in Australia,
right.
or even, having had the benefits of traveling and seeing a few different places, yeah, the exposure you have to people and lifestyles and things like that in the United States, I think is unparalleled. I don't think there's any other place, whether it's South America, Europe, Asia, there's very different environments. There's obviously pros and cons, but yeah, I 100% agree. It's a lot more rich in diversity here than in many places, and that's changing. But still, I mean, it's a great place. Yeah.
Right. So maybe if you dig deeper, so now I think at this point in your life, you are essentially good at a corporate. You have done work with a lot of top companies in the US, and you're going through a career, right? Did you ever, as you were growing up with your friends in Bombay, was making it in a job or coming outside Bombay, was this something that you were always thinking about, or what were your initial days of your life where you were aspiring? Um, what were your aspirations all about? I mean, that's the question I would have.
Yeah, and this is it's a interesting thing if I reflect back on it, right? Because when you're in school and then from there to 12th grade and then getting into undergraduate degrees, you're not thinking so much about kind of where you're going in life. I certainly did not, right? I was just happy living in the moment. I think I lived somewhat of a protected kind of childhood as well. Being from the fact that my parents we grew up in a relatively well-to-do environment, I think. So we were privileged in that sense. But coming from a middle to upper middle class environment where, like I said, we could go out and have meals, and my parents loved to travel. So I used to hear stories about them, or we would take some trips occasionally as well. I certainly did not live the high-end celebrity life where I was going to Europe to shop and all of those things. But I had once in 3 to maybe 5 years, we'd go out and do something, right? So so I lived a somewhat of a bubbled life in that sense. But having been in the school system and having gone through college, I didn't have necessarily a goal in mind that I had to leave the country. That was not my motive. I would say, I was doing decently well in school. College was a different experience. I think what I found out getting into engineering was that what I was learning was not the same as what I was being taught, if that makes sense. So you had instructors coming in and doing stuff in class and never really understood why I was doing what I was doing. I was just doing it, and so that didn't quite fit well with me. And it going through high school and everything, I'd probably say I was in like the top 5 of the class. Right? So I was pretty good in my education and studies. My parents had no worries about that stuff. Things would just get done on the side. When I came to college, I was exposed to this entire different kind of universe, right, of personalities and people and experiences. And then the education was very kind of almost tangential to what I was expecting, right? I was doing engineering. I was doing from one of the better schools in Mumbai University. But when you start to kind of learn that, it didn't make sense as to why I was doing what I was doing, some of those things. So automatically, the interest and commitment in the studies kind of started to wane. And there were other things that I started dabbling in, more social and all of that. And I had a few kind of knocks on my head at that time as well. But nonetheless, what I did figure out was when I was coming out of my 3rd year and 4th year in engineering, I knew I wanted to study telecommunications, which was kind of the area that I really enjoyed. And and so as I started exploring that a little bit more, it became apparent that there was a lot more experiences and educational opportunities I could get from looking at, right. So so yeah, I mean, even though I had campus jobs and things like that back in the day, just speaking to my seniors in college and other peer groups, I did, it became like a thing that I wanted to go and do, which was to come abroad and study, right? And focus on telecommunications.
Right. So I think so I come from a different background, so I think I can poke few of these questions to you. So you said as you were growing up, you were one of the better students in your class, and you went up to college, and then you ended up college, and you felt going outside, like Bombay is the best you could get in India, and maybe beyond this is to come outside somewhere.
Mm.
Um, as you consider yourself as, let's say, you figured out studies well, and you knew a path through that. But in your growing up, as you were growing, were there times in your life that you felt that, like all of us have some kind of insecurities as we grow up. So I wanted to get into Indian Army at some point of time, and I tried, and I did not qualify.
Mm.
So were there things like that where, though you were doing good at studies or you went through your engineering, as you just said, but
Yes.
were there things that you were really insecure about and you felt that you don't know what you are doing essentially? Or was there a phase like that?
Um, yeah, and I would say again, it's part of coming from a nuclear kind of family in India. There's this unsaid, in some cases unsaid expectations, right? Especially
Mm,
if you're like doing well academically, then there's
mm,
there's a little bit of, we live our lives through our children, right? And I think my
right.
parents were in some part guilty of that. I'm guilty of that in some ways, of how
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
deal with my daughter
mm-hmm,
as well.
mm-hmm,
But the degrees are different. But so there was a bit of this expectation that, okay, the boy is doing well. Maybe we put him in sports, give him exposure to sports. Maybe he needs to learn some sort of a classical instrument. So why don't we put him in like a violin
mm-hmm,
class? And then, because he can do so well in science and math, maybe he needs to take the IIT entrance exams, and he can get
mm-hmm,
into, IIT and this and that.
mm-hmm,
And each one of those were moments where I kind of, I did the things because I didn't want to disappoint. And when I look
mm-hmm,
back at it, I'm like, I shouldn't have done it in the first place. There was no need for me even to do it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
To the point that, and I'll be a little bit kind of candid here, but
Yeah.
I took, so I learned the violin for 6 years, right? So
Mm-hmm,
from about sixth grade till, no, not sixth grade, till about fifth grade till about 10th, maybe 11th, I was going to a
mm-hmm,
violin class. I had a teacher I used to go every week,
mm-hmm,
but I was never excited to go to it, and
mm-hmm,
to the point that, whatever I learned, even to date, if somebody were to give me a violin, I don't even feel like playing it. And
mm-hmm,
I'd much rather just pick up some drums and learn to play drums if I wanted to, right? And
mm-hmm,
but that choice, that reflection did not happen back then, and I didn't put a stop to it then and there. And at some point, that kind of makes you think, like, should I have pushed back? Should I have focused on something else, right?
mm-hmm.
um, and the same thing with the IIT exams, right?
Right.
I remember
Mm-hmm,
one of my earliest, one of the memories was, obviously, I took the JEE. I knew I was not going to do too well
okay.
because I was
Mm-hmm,
not prepared enough for it. I was not motivated to prepare enough for it.
mm-hmm.
And then that was one of the first, I think that was the first time ever that they had a leak in the paper and in the JEE
Uh-huh.
paper back then.
Okay.
And then
Mm-hmm.
they decided to have a re-exam about six
Oh,
or
wow.
8 weeks later. And
Mm-hmm.
so I came back home after the exams. A week or so later, I'm just relaxing because it's summer vacation. And my
Mm-hmm.
mom came excited to me and said, "Hey, guess what? You're going to have a second chance at this." And I'm like, "Oh, you got to be kidding me!" Right? Yeah. So it's a little bit of that it's not, those expectations weren't necessarily imposed on you, but you
Mm-hmm.
feel like that's the right thing to do. And um, yeah, when I look back, I certainly want to, my wife and I, we try to make sure our child, she's aware of what she's getting into, the choices she's making, the consequences of that. But I don't want to be that person that's just going to kind of try to force them into doing
Right.
something just because I feel like that's the right thing for them to do in their lives.
I think the one that you're talking about, I think this happens with many, like developing countries, right? Especially from India, we have seen. I talked to a lot of people who come from China who have this similar story that you're talking about, right? We
Mm.
also see this even in the US, first generation Indians, the kids. I don't want to label every parent as the same, but if you look at like the spelling bees and stuff like that, it's sort of a given that
Mhm.
if you are from Indian background in the US, you're essentially doing spelling bee, or
Mm.
you have to be good at it, or you have to be good at math. And I think these things, I mean, it's different as you're saying, as you've grown up, now you can process it better. But many a times, I think, as I see youth now also back in India, right? The expectations have not changed. Essentially, this is
Mhm.
still the expectation, and I think I understand the logic behind it now that I'm a parent of two kids. I know why we do it. The
Yeah,
parents also have this expectation that I don't want my kids to sort of fall through the crack. I'm sure your parents, as you said, were well-to-do in Bombay and didn't want their kids to fall through the crack, and this was more the tried and tested
correct.
steps through which you could do it.
Yeah.
And again, I think this brings to another question that I have related to it, right? So I don't know if you track India nowadays, but you see a lot of excitement in India, especially the youth with entrepreneurship and people having a lot of different options as they are growing up as you were
Yes.
growing up. Um, and they now have what I would say is analysis paralysis. So a lot of people that I talk to, they don't commit to anything just because they have too many options to go after. Like, so there is
Mm.
an option to go to the US or get into like these product companies in Bangalore or to IT services, or you
Yeah.
could be a YouTuber, you could be an influencer. Any one of these things you could do, and you see them end up struggling with making a decision. So if I know at that point of time when you were growing up, maybe your options were limited, but
Mm.
given now where you see the world now, how would someone analyze so much of information to do like a step that they could take? Is there a framework that you think that someone could
Yeah.
take, or ways to decide what to do?
Yeah, no, and I would say probably 99.5% of the human population doesn't know what their passion truly is. And
Mhm.
the passion changes multiple times over their
Right.
life, right? I mean,
Right.
um, I might want to be a gymnast for the first 15 years of my life, and then suddenly I
Mm.
discover a passion for art, and then then it's music
Right.
or something else. Who knows what it is, right? So I think we all struggle with that in many ways. I don't think and you're right, the opportunities in India are a lot more in that sense now than it was back then. And and when even when you say opportunities, the option of failing and doing something different, I
Mhm.
don't know if it fully exists in India yet, right? So
Mm.
I could join, I have, nephews and nieces who've gone to like University of Chicago and in some of the
Mhm.
best business schools in
Mhm.
the country.
Mhm.
They started doing that, and then they decided, you know what, they don't want to do that. They want to do medicine instead, right? And they
Mhm.
just kind of pivot,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, imagine doing something like that in an environment in India where there's so much
Mm.
investment that has gone into your education and so much hopes and ambitions built
Mhm.
into that one individual. It puts a lot of
Mm.
pressure, right? So I don't know if they've necessarily made that shift, right?
Mhm.
Where you're enabling and you're okay with people experimenting and figuring out what they have. Nothing has to happen by year 17 or by year 21 or by year 25, right? Some people just take
Mhm.
longer, and I
Mhm.
think, in my opinion, I think that's okay, right? I mean, it's
Mhm.
you there's trade-offs with it. Yes, you may not have enough money with you. You may not have the best experiences at that point in life, but at the end of the day, you might be, when you come out on the other side, like 30 years later, who knows,
Mhm.
maybe you'll have a different perspective. So I think we owe it to each other to allow for the other person to fail, and
Mm.
but give them enough of a safety net to where you're not going to see them completely wither away, right? I wouldn't.
Mm.
I'm so my and I'm digressing, but I'll come back to the framework
Mm.
here in a second.
Mm.
But um, you know, my daughter is very passionate about dancing, and she
Mhm.
she figured this out when she was 4 or 5 years old. And so she
Mm-hmm.
is extremely committed to her dancing skills. She does about 16 hours of dancing a week. She does
Mm-hmm.
jazz and hip hop and ballet and
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of other performing
Mm-hmm.
arts. And
Mm-hmm.
she's into making music videos now with a couple of agents
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. So she's
Mm-hmm.
really investing her time in it. She knows that not every one in maybe 5,000 artists in Broadway actually make it to
Mm-hmm.
Broadway, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so the odds of that are pretty low, but she understands that, or we're trying to make sure that she follows her passion, but she also needs to educate herself so she has a fallback, or
All
she
back,
could
man.
be my wife uses this, she could be a pediatrician or a dentist who likes to dance, not a dancer
Right.
who wishes to
Yeah.
go to the dentist every
Right,
day.
right, right, right.
So anyway, so I think you want to weigh those and know that you can give some room to fail, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time you've got the support that you need. Now, in terms of the framework, so again, and this is going back to identifying your passion.
Mm-hmm.
One of the very early kind of things that I took when we were, I'm talking about like 2 3 years into my professional career.
Mm-hmm.
I did something called the Strengths Finders test, or the Strength
Uh-huh.
Finders, and it's a fairly extensively written about kind of framework. It's a
Mm-hmm.
series of books and analyses around it, and it really says the principle around it is that we spend a lot of our time trying to improve on our shortcomings,
Mm-hmm.
optimize for those failures, reduce our failures,
Mm-hmm.
versus if you spend as much time on things that you are naturally good at, then
Mm-hmm.
you could just become even more better at what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing, right? And if you
Mm-hmm.
have a natural inclination towards something, then find
Mm-hmm.
things that will put you in that, right? So the Strength Finders kind of framework identifies about 23 different strengths. You take a series of personality tests and things like that. It
Correct.
gives you what are kind of the 4 or 5 things that you're really good at. So I found that helpful for me very early on to
Mm-hmm.
understand who I was and what
Mm-hmm.
really motivated me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I
Mm-hmm.
didn't use that to make life decisions, but every time I sought out something different, I was like, okay, is this going to help me be very competitive? Is this an area where I can be more, I can build on my self assurance skill set or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So yeah, so Strength Finders I think did have some positive influence in that way for me, um,
Mm-hmm.
and that was of course later on in life.
So I think this is also nice advice, right? So in general, as I was growing up, I'm not sure about how you guys felt about it, but most even in corporate, right? The whole discussion is about finding what your faults are. Like, your feedback mechanism is essentially trying to find faults with you.
Yep.
Even in corporate, even in our life, like our parents
Mhm.
would find a fault. Okay, you're doing good at math, or your English is not up to the mark. And I
Mhm.
think this is contradicting what, as I'm talking about, like this is contradicting to the fact that you don't always have to push your energy into something that you are not great at. And I mean, you will never
Mhm.
get great at what your weaknesses are. You can still improve, but what you're saying is that you should pretty much invest in things that you're passionate about.
Yep.
Um, and now, to that point, I mean, going back to the point that I was trying to get to around in today's world where you have this too many ideas in your head,
Mm.
like I can do this, that, and a number of things. And at times with social media, or the way our lives have become, like it used to be, you had an office, you used to go to an office, you had to come back to your home, and then you had like a church or a temple or a
Mhm.
pub that you would go and meet. Like, so there used to be two or three different areas where people used to go, and these ideas used to get mixed, right? So you
Yes.
would have some ideas there, and now, as we have seen in the last maybe 4 to 5 years, with COVID accelerating it out a lot, your only place that you are there is you are on the web. I mean,
Mhm.
web is the only place you're there. Even
Mhm.
with your friends, with your family, um, most of the time you're messaging or stuff like that, and an office for sure. So there is a lot of influence with ideas all coming through one, like, barrage of pipeline of the information coming to you.
Right.
Now, um, and then you get this concept of, I had these hundreds of ideas I could do.
Yeah.
Now you have one lifetime that you can do things, right? And that's happening, like, even with people who would have seen a lot of things in their life and figured out, okay, if I do this work, I know in 5 years I'll get something. But especially youngsters, as they see these things coming through the pipe, like, oh, today I just want to become like this. Oh, by that time I start thinking about it, someone is saying, okay, violin is not in trend. I need to
Mhm.
get into, guitar, or I'm
Right.
just saying one like instrument perspective, but it could be in game perspective, it could be in startup idea perspective. But
Yep.
then how would someone move from this, I would say, inertia of not taking any action? Any views on have as a society, have we become more sedentary in our approach, and we get dopamine rush by just watching things?
I do think so. I do think so. But I would also add that there's a little bit of we tend to stigmatize a few things that we don't understand, right? So
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. If kids my age were playing video games the whole time, right? People were like, oh, all he does is play video games, right? And it's just going to degenerate their whole mind, and they're not going to be able to, process and do some things. They're going to become addicted to it.
Hmm.
Yes, you do have addiction. Don't get me wrong, right? And it's the same with social media and a few other things as well. But there's and if I went up back if I was a kid and I went up and said I want to become a game tester, video game tester, that's my
Hmm.
ambition in life, right?
Hmm.
8 out of 10 parents would say that doesn't make any sense. Use that skill
Hmm.
somewhere else, right?
Hmm.
But you realize how big the gaming environment is, the industry. It's
Hmm.
second to the movie industry right now, just in form
Hmm.
of entertainment. It's challenging the
Hmm.
entire paradigm. So people don't realize that the things that you do today are going to look very different 20 years from now. And
Hmm.
so the advice is more around exploring and understanding kind of what it is you want to do to make something better than what it is today, right? And in my mind,
Hmm.
that's kind of how I would like to approach it, because we often, and I'm guilty of this as well. I mean, it's in the same boat, right? We're if my daughter came in and said, hey, I got 98 and I came second in class, it's like, how come you didn't get first, right? What happened to those
Hmm.
2 marks, right? Why did you miss out on it? So we tend to
Hmm.
focus on the negatives versus enhancing the positives. And the second part to it is we always tend to ask, what do you want to become? That's
Hmm.
the first question, right? Any teenager,
Hmm.
any high schooler, any undergraduate student, like, what's your goal in life, right? What's your
Hmm.
profession in life that you want to become?
Hmm.
Versus, I think we need to rethink that question. We ask, okay, what are you good at? What do you enjoy doing?
Hmm.
What makes you happy?
Hmm.
And then find a way to enable that. Now, that doesn't mean you don't, like, if I like to travel, doesn't mean I become a travel blogger, and
Hmm.
that becomes my lifestyle. But then I have to find a way to fund that experience. So, and that means
Hmm.
I need to find a well-paying job so I can travel.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so I think we don't spend enough time in analyzing what we truly want to be or what makes us
Hmm.
happy, and using that as a way. And so, to
Hmm.
your point of this large stream of opinionized media and information
Right, right.
we start to see, we are in that echo chamber. We do start to see very limited piece of information, and I feel like
Hmm.
everybody feels like they know a lot about a topic, but when you really
Yeah,
start digging into it, they don't, because all they've
yeah.
seen is a 30-second reel on something, or a snippet of
Right, right, right,
something,
right.
right? So
Hmm.
you have we have to challenge ourselves. We have to have those conversations. I mean, I
Hmm.
did not have those deep intellectual conversations when I was 15 and 18 and 22, but when I got
Hmm.
into my late 20s, we would talk about things. We would talk about religion. We talk about
Hmm.
birth, and we talk about
Hmm.
how what we want to do, and a lot of philosophical stuff we would talk about. And
Hmm.
I think I think there is a scarcity of that conversation, more
Hmm.
about kind of the vanity stuff, right? Which is,
Hmm.
okay, I saw this one do this and make a fool of themselves on this viral video and this and that, right? So it feels like
Hmm.
it's very superficial. It does need to go into
Hmm.
that next deeper conversation, and the focus needs to be around what makes you happy, what
Hmm.
does this achieve, help you achieve what you're trying to get to. Not all conversations are going to be that way, but I think
Hmm.
the more we do that, I think there's a scarcity of that
Okay.
versus talking about
Yeah.
the flavor of the month.
So essentially, you're saying there's a lot of information, but this all of it is superficial. So if you want to really, if you're interested in something, you have to like take that and dig deeper to
Yeah,
to get more
yeah,
context about it.
and not to and try not to stick as the earlier generation.
Mm-hmm,
I'm trying to make an effort not to stigmatize that, right? So
mm-hmm,
if my niece is scrolling on her phone the whole time and watching
mm-hmm,
videos,
mm-hmm,
I want to change the conversation, the narrative, to less about what you're doing and why you need to stop doing it versus what are you getting out of it. What are you
mm-hmm.
learning from this that you can use in your in the go forward, or what
Right.
to do differently? I think
Mm-hmm.
that conversation needs to change at some level.
So I think then it brings to another question, right? So as you started from Bombay, your next aspiration maybe was to get into a college. That would have given you an happiness coming to the US when you landed. So what was your experience about landing in the US for the first time? And how did you have someone here that helped you navigate all of this, or
Yeah.
how was your whole story about coming here?
Yeah. So in my immediate family, I was the first one to come to the United States or leave the country in that sense. But I used to be really active in my college, so I never studied. Like I said at the start, I was spending
Mhm,
more time doing other stuff,
mhm,
and so I used to be
mhm,
the secretary of the student council and all of that stuff. So I was well connected within the
community.
school system in that
Mhm,
sense. So I knew people all around me, and I was lucky to have a few friends who were very close to and whom I looked up to and who gave me good
mhm,
advice, who were actually in the US as well. So one of
mhm,
my closest friends, he was in the same university that I got admitted to, and I
mhm,
eventually decided to go to. So I did have some help in terms of where he just said, "Hey, congratulations, you're here, or when you
mhm,
come here, just come over. You can stay with me, and we'll figure this
mhm,
out."
mhm,
So I
mhm,
had a little bit of that. My parents had, like I said, I didn't have any experience because of I never lived in a dorm or
mhm,
in any of those environments, right? I was
mhm,
living at home, and I went to college, and I came back home every day to a nice meal and all of that.
mhm, mhm.
So and coming from Mumbai, which was again like New York, to a
Yeah,
place like college. So I went to Penn State, and Penn State is literally in the middle of the country, right? In
right.
Pennsylvania, it's in the middle of
Mhm,
Pennsylvania. It's in the valley. There's nothing but fields and farms and valleys all
mhm,
around you there. So
mhm.
it's a small little airport. You had a propeller plane that you had to take to get into it.
From New York.
Yeah, so well, I flew from
Mhm.
Detroit. So from Detroit, I
Oh,
came
okay,
in
to Toronto.
with a plane
Mhm,
into
mhm,
State College, and I landed up there
mhm,
with another friend of mine with two bags, and there was no
mhm.
taxi, no noise, nothing. It was just like pure, calm, serene. It was a very different mindset coming
Mhm,
into, but I actually liked the vibe. I mean, it was coming from a
mhm,
fast, heavy kind of environment to something that was
mhm,
maybe a little bit more laid back. I mean, don't get me wrong.
mhm,
Within 6 weeks, we had explored everything there was to explore in that town because there was nothing else other
mhm.
than college, right?
I think I see it. Yeah. Mhm,
But then you start to do things. You meet people and you have fun either way. So it was a little bit of a shock when I came in, and of course, when you're coming in, this is back in the day when the age of Seinfeld and Friends
right,
and
right.
and
Mhm,
Star Wars and this and that. So you have
mhm.
this kind of
Things.
predetermined kind of mindset, right? You
Mhm.
think like I don't want to make this an adult show, but you feel like, okay, the next girl you see, you can just go talk to her, and then
Right,
you're
right.
out on a drink,
Mhm,
and things will happen.
right,
So,
right, right.
so
Yeah,
you come with these preconceived notions,
no
which you
sure.
quickly
Right.
just kind of put away, right? And I think that's a little bit of a growing up moment in some sense.
Right. Wow, that I think that's interesting because I think as you just talked about Seinfeld and like normally I am many a times like in the past when I've gone back and I've talked with my friends who have not been to the US, I think they have the similar question, right? I mean, they could see things on TV where they show New York and people just going out and
Yep.
just having fun all the time.
Yep.
I mean, that itself is something sort of a and I talked to them about saying what you see on TV is a section of the population, but that's not what the
Yeah.
whole of the US is. Like
Yeah.
even in terms of technology, right? If you go to the rural parts of America, we see things which you would not imagine in a developed country in the world where internet is not that great or you know
Yeah.
things are pretty. So that's a Yeah, that's learning. So in terms of you, as you said, like this wasn't you came here with had this all this aspiration and the sort of the vibe that you saw on TV, you wanted to see all of this. So these so you got that that phase as you went through, and now that you're in your career here for long.
Yeah.
One of the question that I have is, and I also struggle with that, and I it's tough to, and everyone has a different answer to this, is we have these happiness peak that we have. So we want to get there. That's the
Mhm.
goal. Like, so for example, I'm sure now you will have your career goal, you have a goal for your daughter, and all of these things are stacked up. And let's say you get it. Let's say you wanted to be in the US, get married, have a house. Let's say I'm sure when you landed it in the US, you were like, okay, let me get my citizenship, get my house, I have a XYZ car brand that I want to drive, and I have a
Right.
family. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm just saying these could be an aspiration of a college graduate coming to the US.
Right.
And these have their own variable happiness peak. But
Mhm.
then as you live through your life, how do you keep up with the energy, and how have you, and I think I call it a hedonic treadmill, right? So you
Mhm.
you you essentially don't ever stop. And then this is also a part of how we grow, but also it creates hollowness in our life. Like, okay, is this all that I wanted? So how do
Mhm.
you navigate that, like in your career or personal life, or have you ever done that over the last maybe 10, 15 years?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's yeah, I've I haven't been a good long-term planner. A lot of my thinking, anticipation tends to be and I don't think this is any different than anybody else, but we tend to think in 3-year time horizons or 5-year time horizons, right? That's kind of
Mhm.
the extent of which I can do my thinking and my planning. I smiled when you kind of mentioned kind of the goals early on. I it was some of the first conversations I had with my roommates back in when I'd come to Penn State was, when do you have any plans of going back? What are your ambitions around, when will you go back, if you go back, right? And
Mhm.
so various answers. I had a friend of mine who said, back in the day, he said, 1 crore. The minute I have 1 crore worth of rupees, I'm going to go
Yeah,
back, right?
right.
Now his net worth is multiples of that, and
Multiple,
go up
yeah.
and going back.
You'll never go. Yeah.
In
Mhm.
my point, I was like, I said, okay, I thought, including education, 8 years. Yeah, 8 years is
Mhm.
when things in India would be so much more different and important and improved that it would
Mhm.
make the most sense for me to go back and live in India. It wasn't because I
Mhm.
did not want to be in India or I did not want to be in the US. It just, to me, it felt like opportunity wise, career wise, that would
Mhm.
make the most sense. But
Right.
obviously that has not worked out. So,
That doesn't,
um,
right.
anyway, so in as I've been, so coming out of it, my priorities out of finishing up my masters was, obviously I had to take a loan out to come to
Mhm.
study in the
Mhm.
US.
Mhm.
I wanted to pay off that loan. I did not want to
Mhm.
be kind of a burden on my parents financially as well.
Mhm.
So I did a lot of work, working part-time jobs, trying to get internships whenever I can to do those
Mhm.
things. Then after that, it was about finding a job, and then it was
Mhm.
progressing in the career there, and then
Mhm.
marriage and family and all of that kind of fitted in
Right.
there as well. So
Mhm.
I do think, again, this goes back to a little bit of maybe that strength finder framework for me
Mhm.
is, what do I want to do? What's going to motivate me? What's going to drive me as a goal over the next, 3 to 5 years?
Okay.
I don't, and it's not always it's actually, and I don't mean this in a boastful way, but it has very little to do with money actually for me.
Mhm. Okay.
It's always been around having a better quality of life, whether it is around improving my fitness, or it is about
Mhm.
giving back and doing some things through
Mhm. Mhm.
opportunities there, or to
Mhm.
be able to do something with the family, for the family. These
Mhm.
are the kind of short term kind of goals or targets I like to set for myself,
Mhm.
and I found that that's what's kept me moving. Now I do suffer from the same thing where I come back and I look at it and I said, geez, what, it's 40 something years now already. I wish I had a reset button. I could just go back and then, just go live in Africa and explore and do something myself. It's a little unrealistic in that sense, but
Yeah.
I think the having some amount of short-term goals that are not always tied to career progression and financials helps me kind of offset, so and that when for me, when I do that, when I set myself some of those goals, then everything else just kind of falls in place, right? So if I want to do more charitable contributions, right, and that's something, then I know I have to do work in other areas to be able to support that effort, right? And so that kind of helps me kind of put all of those building blocks in place,
Blocks. Yeah, right.
versus just kind of staying focused on promotion,
Right.
dollars in income or whatever.
So I think one thing I wanted to draw from here also is that at your experience level with all these years and all the things that you have achieved in your career and your family, you still have your doubts, like this session of doubts. One of the things that I also want to reflect as I talk to a lot of people is, do people who are successful ever have any doubts, and how do they get past their doubts? So what I mean by, we all have this imposter syndrome of like, do I really belong here? Am I saying things right? So do you go through this? And if you go through these, what do you tell yourself to get past those things?
Yeah, it's a great topic, and I kind of went through that a little bit, not just outside, but even outside of work, but even in work, right? When you're in a consulting kind of environment, right, and you're parachuted in to a client in an area that you probably don't know much about, but you have, it's a short term, 3 to 4 month kind of burst of things that you're doing, and you just have to quickly absorb and then create new things, right? So I've often found myself questioning, like, what am I really doing here? Do I even know this area? Am I even supposed to be here? Right. And I think this is where it comes back to being assured on what you're really good at and finding ways to bring those things out into creating value, right, wherever you go. But that being said, for me, I think it is, so I having the opportunity to do dabble in a few things, whether it's on the personal front or professional front, it makes it enriching to me. That diversity in what I learn, and even if I fail, has creates more lessons for me that I can then use and hopefully inspire other people around, right? I agree with the imposter syndrome kind of argument there, because there are times when you feel like, oh, everybody else is doing this, maybe I should be doing the same thing, right? Everybody was creating a startup like 15 years ago, and so it's like, okay, maybe I should go do something in a startup too. It didn't happen, right? And I actually went through that now just recently in the last 5 years, where we actually got together a couple of friends and we built a company from scratch. We took it to about 250 paid customers and this and that. And then we felt, okay, this is, we were at a point in life where we felt this is not the thing that we want to invest in.
You want to go,
What came out of that 2 to 3 year experience was tremendous from a learning and experience. And more importantly, the family around each one of us was watching, right? So my brother, my parents, my daughter, their families, my investors and my business partners' families, they were all watching this, and they saw this, and it set an example for them that, you can do something like this, but that it may not always work out, right? And you have to be open and transparent about why you did what you did, or what the choices you make. So I think you kind of do those things. You find your way through it. Is kind of my thing. I don't think there's a set kind of formula that you have to follow and get along in life. I think you just go with, the things that mean the most to you, and the opportunities when they present themselves, or you go find those opportunities if you know what works for you.
So on this topic, right? So as you talked about your startup and then sort of coming out of it, in an Indian context or any context, you will say, okay, oh, that startup did not work, so it's a failure. So as we were growing up, especially, I mean, I can understand from at my vantage point that how important that failure is and the
Mm.
learning that you get, like how it accelerates yourself into many different, right? So
Yep.
whatever I would have earned in my salary from, let's say, 20 to 30, I could make that money in 2 years with that accelerated lessons when I went get to a next place, right?
Yes.
And that's something I think a lot of people don't realize as they're growing up. And I think it also has to go back to you, as we talked about your parents having some expectation on you, and failure was not an expectation that they had on you. And
Mm.
do you, how do you process failure? Not only now that you know for yourself, you
Yeah.
go out and do new things, but how should someone process failures when they're getting many of them as they're growing up, and how should they, like, I mean, mental state, because
Mm.
I think there's a huge taboo with failure, especially in India,
Yes.
that people will not do anything new just because it doesn't have any failure involved in it, like it's a standard path I can take.
Right. No, and I completely understand where that's coming from, because not everybody has the same opportunity set or privileges that even I had, right? We talked a
Mhm,
little bit about my engineering
mhm,
experience, where I struggled at times. I got knocked on my head a couple of times. So in my first year of engineering, I actually I failed a few of those courses, right? And
mhm,
coming from being top of the class for the first 12,
mhm,
15
mhm,
years of my education, and then kind of
mhm,
hitting this, it hit me like a freight train, right? And it's like, okay,
mhm,
why?
mhm,
How did you suddenly just kind of go
mhm,
from
mhm,
here to there, right? So,
mhm,
um, so and I can imagine that if you're coming from a family that has very little to give outside of
mhm,
this, they've put in all of their investments in you
mhm,
as an individual, then it's a
mhm,
really hard place to be, right?
mhm,
And it can, that pressure, expectations, it can wear you down.
mhm,
I personally, when I think about what happened there, I use that as a way to kind of maybe introspect a little bit and figure out what can I do differently in terms of
mhm,
achieving what I need to do. And if my goal there, it's funny, one of the first things I did after that was,
mhm,
it immediately, I had a heart to heart with my parents, and it
mhm,
immediately kind of lowered their expectations of what I was going
mhm,
to get out of every exam I was going to take after that, right? Before,
mhm.
the conversation used to be like, are you going to, they wouldn't even ask me, because doing well was like table stakes, right?
Given, yeah, yeah.
You just
Mhm,
want to figure out how much I made at the end of the day, or they didn't even care.
mhm,
Then the
mhm.
conversations became like, you think you'll pass, you'll be okay, right?
Right,
So
right.
yeah, it helped reset a little bit of that expectation. But
Mhm,
and that's because I told them, like, look, I mean, there are other things I want to do, right? And this is not
mhm,
like my one and only priority. Yes, I do want to finish and I want to complete.
mhm,
I'm not going to drop out of college, but
mhm,
it helped me kind of reset some expectations, helped me
mhm,
prioritize what was important to me, and
mhm,
then I started to figure out what I could do to make those happen, right? So if I
mhm,
knew that I had to do, in whatever my expectations were, if I had the expectation that I was going to become top of the class again, then I
mhm,
would have channeled all of my energy into that, and that would be my
mhm,
only goal, right? But if that
mhm,
was not, and I knew I had to get a first class, right?
mhm,
Not a distinction, but a first class in my engineering, then
mhm,
if that meant I needed 2 months before the exams to really focus in on that, then I
mhm.
would spend the rest of my time doing other stuff. But those two
Right.
months, I was kind of zoned in on the education.
Doing that. Got it. Yeah.
So I think failure creates these moments where it allows you to introspect and determine
Mhm,
what truly drives you and what motivates you.
mhm,
And you've got to use that and talk about it, right? One of the things we don't do is we don't talk about it with each other, right?
mhm, mhm,
The very fact that we publish our scorecards in this country, right? We don't
mhm,
publish our scorecards, right? Everything's kind of behind glass wall, behind a door.
mhm,
So it's a very personal thing. You're always
mhm,
worried about, should I talk about this? Can I ask this person what they did? In India, it
mhm,
wasn't like that. Where I
mhm,
was, the scorecard used to be there. Everybody knew who passed, who
mhm,
failed, what score
mhm.
they got,
Right, 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 right,
right?
right.
So it was very open in that sense, and it made you either you could either just turn down and shut down completely, or
Right, right, right.
have a
Yeah,
conversation and say, yeah man, I really struggled with this thing, I just did not get this
get
course,
right.
and I need some help, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think having those conversations helps, and
Mm,
finding those people that you trust and whom you can rely on, whether it's
mm,
friends, family, advisors, mentors.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's very valuable for everybody, and advice, fortunately or
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, comes for free. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes
Mm-hmm.
bad advice as well.
Right, right, right. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so I think as we talked about all of this, so now that you have see, we are in your midlife, right? So even with today's standards, people are living up to 80 and 100. So you have experienced over last 20, 25 years a lot of different things, right? But as you were growing up, I'm sure your parents or society would have said few rules to success. Don't fail.
Mhm.
Do your studies, or don't have to worry about passion. Make sure that you make some money. I'm just
Yeah.
making it up. I mean, there are many rules that people say,
Yeah.
and we were growing up. So, what are few rules which you think which you learned at a childhood still holds good? And what are few things that you learned or heard people did, like in terms of whether it's a framework or a quote or ideas or
Hmm.
advice which did not work. So things that you felt are paths to success, but you don't feel about it, and few which you think are really strong and solid, you should go about it. So maybe
Yeah.
a couple of them should be fine.
Yeah. My parents used to always tell me, even growing up, it was like, dream big, right? Everything,
Okay.
dream big. You can do anything and everything. Everything is
Hmm.
possible. The whole world is at your foot. And when I look back at that, I think that's good, but it's not realistic in some sense.
Okay.
So when I
Okay.
when I think back at that, I say yes, that's absolutely something, but you
Hmm.
always need to have kind of a realistic kind of lens to it as well,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
To me, that's one that I've found has been a little bit of a conundrum, right? Do I really think that
Mm.
I can be the next kind of big Bill Gates with my startup company, and that's going to make me,
Right.
I'm going to go IPO and I'm going to generate billions
Hmm.
of dollars?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
wishful
Hmm.
thinking, but the
Hmm.
odds of that happening are low. That's
Hmm.
the one. The second one that I think that's really stuck with me is, champions are made when no one is watching, right? And that's
Right.
the
Hmm.
simple thing is, and champions doesn't necessarily mean achieving being at the pinnacle of
Hmm.
everything, but it
Hmm.
speaks to the commitment, the hard work, the effort it takes to do anything that you want to accomplish, right?
Hmm.
There's a common kind of guideline around 10,000 hours, right? It takes 10,000
Right.
to achieve perfection, or achieve success
Hmm.
in any
Hmm.
any skill or trade. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it all kind of boils down to the same thing, right? It's
Hmm.
about how you outwork, and how you
Hmm.
commit, and how do you persevere. And that
Hmm.
kind of speaks to a little bit of that immigrant kind of mindset, right? Which
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
we bring in some ways, is that grit, right?
Right.
When we're coming out of college, it did not matter if I had the highest paying job in out there. I just
Hmm.
made lemons out of lemonade. I made lemonade out of
Right.
lemons.
Right.
Whatever I had,
Hmm.
I would find my
Hmm.
way in.
Hmm.
I would work and
Hmm.
work and work, and then grow my way
Hmm.
into
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
job, or in the company. Um,
Right.
and I think that's the part that's probably stuck a
Stuck.
little bit with me. Yeah.
Hmm. So you said dreaming big works, but not ideally have seen it. But the 10,000, or having that perseverance, even if you're failing at it, or having like going after it, even if everything doesn't work for you, it's something that has worked out for you. And I think it's interesting because I've talked with I think one of my other guests also talked about this 10,000 hour rule that he thinks is really impactful. So yeah, I
Mm.
mean that these things I think are great. I mean, anyone who is starting off can think through these points. So we'll try and shift a little bit of the gear in terms of how, as you think about the future, right? So, as we are going through this time in our society, right, the technology is accelerating in a way that maybe it was not there 20 years back. Maybe it was accelerating in that speed, but I feel now the acceleration is also going much faster as we see in other technologies, right? And we talked about you raising a kid, about she doing dancing, and you talking about she having a job and then being a dancer, a doctor, or being a dancer. Um, what do you think as these accelerated technologies around AI is coming in with our jobs, with our next generation jobs? How do you think about these? Do you think about these things as a change it does to the society or your life or your family's life? And how do you prepare if you were to ever prepare for all of these?
Yeah, it's a little, there's a little bit of a, in my mind, there's a little bit of a hype around it as well. I mean, again, I'm not dismissing having been working in the field of data and machine learning and AI and all of those different things. I certainly believe there are, applications of it that we experience and live with every day. I do believe that it's not that AI is going to take our jobs away, but the person who uses AI is going to take your job away. I think that's
Right.
how I think about it. So you have to be kind of AI, well versed with AI or anything like that. And it's not just this, it could be any other technology that comes out as well, right? It's not just the AI world. But so I do believe that that's a skill set that everybody should be comfortable with, right? And it is going to become easier and easier. If you think about barriers to entry and the learning barriers, right, previously you had to take computer science or computer architecture or all of those other things to learn and code in those things. Now you're getting into
Right.
no code, low code kind of environments where
Right.
the adoption curve is vastly reduced, right? So I think it's going to become easier for people to use it, and successful people are people who are going to be able to understand it, accept it, and apply it. That's one part of it. But when you think about kind of what does the world look like over the next two generations, I think that's a really hard problem. I mean, I mentioned I tend to think in 3 to 5 year
3 to
increments.
5 years.
This
Okay.
is a
Okay.
really long thing. But having said that, the fundamental things will still exist, right? We still will still have environmental problems that we have to solve. We will have kind of big ambitious goals around cosmic and space travel that will continue to exist. We will have improvements in communication and all of that. But at the end of it, kind of the human psyche and the human relationships will have to exist, right? It may take on different forms. It may express itself differently, either through a social digital medium versus in person. But ultimately, if you're in a field that allows you to understand and apply some of those technology skills into some of those problems, right? Again, the people who are going to, in my mind, who are going to succeed are not just those who are in tech, but it's about taking that tech and applying it in the other industries.
Right. Right.
That's where you could still prosper and you could make impact at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I think on this point, I would say humans have a tendency to not do anything against the status quo. So, as you are saying, okay, there is space travel and other things that we need to solve for. It's like imagination, right? So I think you're able to imagine that future. For a lot of people as they're growing up, okay, I did engineering, or I may get a job in XYZ, or I'm a blog writer. Now GPT-4 can write better blog than me, then I am out of job, and that's the end of the story, right? And so I think as a society, uh, we as humans, I think we have a tendency we like stability, but the growth happens when there is no stability. I mean, the growth essentially is not stable. It has to be on that top right? So I think that's going to be a challenge as we grow. And I think this next couple of years, till the time we figure out what humans can
Yeah.
do better than this, I think these things will keep happening. So what do you read or follow to keep up with like philosophy or anything to do with technology? What are your interests, and what are the good sources of information for you that you follow?
Yeah, and I just want to go back one more thing. I may have
Mm-hmm.
mentioned this before in passing as well, but I think an area that we don't focus enough on is grit, right? And
Mm-hmm.
again, we as we send our kids to school here as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody teaches grit, but I think grit just
Yeah.
comes by as a byproduct, and we certainly had that in India, coming from a very
Right.
competitive environment where
Right.
you had to,
Right.
even a 99 was never good enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you learn to adapt and evolve and make do with things and optimize them, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we engineer
Mm-hmm.
around it a little bit, and I think that's a skill set that we don't do enough of here in
In the US.
look
Mm-hmm.
at a second generation American, right, from a
Right.
immigrant family. We don't teach
Mm-hmm.
that, right? So I do think taking time and explaining that to our children and helping them recognize that they have to think outside the box, they have to push the boundaries of what their limits are and find new ways of doing things helps
Mm-hmm.
them along that growth curve. Um, in terms of content that if I can do it, right, I do enjoy reading. I do enjoy podcasts. In my spare time, whenever I can get a hold of it.
Mm-hmm.
COVID's kind of put a little bit of a wrinkle in there in terms of my schedules, but
Mm-hmm.
some of the things outside of my day to day job,
Mm-hmm.
I do enjoy a lot around podcasts like Hidden Brain,
Uh-huh.
Invisibilia, Radio
Mm-hmm.
Lab,
Mm-hmm.
those types of things. How I built this. That was
Yeah.
another kind of NPR. So that this whole
Mm-hmm.
genre of
NPR shows. Yeah.
NPR like shows and offshoots
Mm-hmm.
coming out of that, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
another one back in the day called Reply All, which had some from Gimlet,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was fascinating, and now of course after they got acquired by Spotify, it's going to become a different thing. But
Mm-hmm.
each one of them would explore different things, right? So Hidden Brain and Radio Lab would look more at
Yeah.
human psychologies and behavioral
Mm-hmm.
patterns and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Reply All or Crypto Island and all of those things would be focused on very specific technology areas, maybe a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of a
Mm-hmm.
political angle to it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it just, diversity in information, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
what I crave for
Mm-hmm.
in some ways there.
Yeah, I too like Hidden Brain. I don't know if you listen to Freakonomics, used to be one of those as well.
Yeah.
All of
Any of the
this list
Malcolm
of
Gladwell ones, I mean, Malcolm Gladwell has some.
Malcolm Gladwell, yeah, yeah. I think they're interesting ones. So as we try to wrap up here, Kaushik, what would be like in terms of your legacy, right? For me, I have gone around the fact that it doesn't matter whether you have a legacy or not. People really don't care. Um, but you have spent a good amount of life in this world.
Mhm.
What would be the kind of things you want people to take away from? Like, do you even think about your legacy? Yes, you may or may not. And if you do, what kind of thing you want to leave behind in terms of ideas or things that people could use from your experience that you have built at
Yeah,
this point of time? I
yeah,
mean,
and we've
at this point of time.
yeah, my wife and I, we've talked a little bit about that as well. And I think the most common, the easiest thing to say is, my family is my legacy,
Mhm.
my children and what they end up being. That's the legacy. That's the footprint I leave behind.
Mhm.
I do think we owe it to ourselves and the people around to do more in that sense.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and again, without craving for attention and things like that, it's really finding passion subjects and being able to do
Mhm.
more in it, right? So whether it's around giving back, philanthropy, or it is
Mhm.
embracing some sort of a movement around in the environment, or being able to social justice or whatever that might be,
Mhm.
doing
Mhm.
some small part in any one or some of those, I think inspires people around you to think more
Mhm.
and do differently, right? So um,
Mhm.
so yeah, I don't have a succinct thing saying that this is my legacy and I'm going
Mhm.
to work towards it yet.
Mhm.
I'm still discovering that, right? And
Okay.
so, but at the same time, I know that having been in this country now for 22 years,
Mhm.
I take my when I became a citizen, I was super excited to vote because I had never
Mhm.
voted in India before. I came
Mhm.
to the
Mhm.
US before, yeah, I was even eligible to vote. Um,
Mhm.
so I take a lot of pride in doing my research and knowing what I'm doing there. I want to get more involved in it. I have small things, right? I have friends who complain about getting jury duty calls, and I sit and explain to them why it is important for you to do some of those things. So
Right.
it's inspiring or making some informed decisions around it, and hopefully that those are creating some muscle somewhere, trigger somewhere that are prompting people to think and react differently. Is how I would think I would have, if I had to go, if I were to die and people would remember something that they learned from me or that I inspired them to do, then I think I've done my job. That's
That, yeah.
how I like to think about it.
That's really nice. So before we drop, I think I won't leave you without your view about India. I mean, you said that when you came in, you wanted to go back to India maybe in 8 years term.
Yes.
Maybe India was not growing as the way it was growing. It's growing now. And this, there has been start and stop in Indian story. I mean, when I was in my college, there used to be the tiger and the elephant story about China and India
Right.
being the elephant.
Right.
But we have seen that ebbs and flow.
Yes.
I know you said you spent some time in India a couple of months back. What's your, or maybe you read about India. What's your view about the country in terms of economic growth, and where do you think that's heading?
Yeah, so I think so. First of all, I think there's been tremendous innovation and tremendous development that has happened in and around India. Even with whether it is around the centralized ID schemes that they have started putting up, and the fact that there is investments around creating more jobs around the economy, around the bigger cities, the mega cities, as well as the second and third tier cities. I do think there's a lot of that. There's a healthy kind of middle class, and my experience, whether it was through my startup, having teams in India, or having actually worked in India. So I actually went from here for about a year and a half, and I was doing, I was working with some of the largest network deployments, telecom network deployments in India back in the day. So having been through that, I do feel like there's a lot of positive kind of momentum around it. But then the part that that's probably the most frustrating to me is the bureaucracy, or the whatchamacallit, the corruption, right? Anything and everything that people try to find shortcuts around, that moral compass is missing. Right? And I'm not saying it exists in the US and we're all just so much better than it. It exists here as well, but fundamentally, if I had to ask somebody, do you know the difference between right and wrong in India? The answer is always going to be, it depends, right? It's never a right or wrong. And I think that's a challenge for India. So, I mean, it's inspiring to see how much change has happened, how much development has happened, how people are traveling around, how more well aware they are. But I think the fact that we still don't have that kind of compass and that commitment around doing the right thing, I think that's going to be a detriment. And I know it's hard with 1.6 billion people, right? You always have to kind of be recognized and you fight to survive. But I think there is, and the second part of it, of course, is, the politics of it aside, but the fact that we're still kind of dealing with some of those concerns around religion and the color of the skin and all of that. Yes, we're a new country in that sense, but we're in the 21st century. We should be going past that, right? Instead, still having those discussions, and it seems to me a little bit backward, and there's that inertia around change that people are not making. So I think there's a lot of positives, but some of those things around corruption have to be addressed.
Yeah, and on the last part, I think US is also still struggling with it. So I don't think India is also, and I think, as you just said, 1.6 billion with hundreds of viewpoints, and where we are in the economic ladder makes it more challenging to solve those problems at scale. Okay, Kaushik, so that's all we had, and I will, if people want to reach out, I'll put your LinkedIn if you want as in my show notes. So that's so we'll put that in my show notes. Thank you, Kaushik, for your time.
I appreciate you taking the time, and it was nice chatting.
Thanks so much for watching the video. I hope you found this video interesting. Please leave a comment if you have any questions or thoughts.